Hey, how's it going, everyone? Let's get right into this week of astrology. This is for September 30 through October 6 of 2025. So this week we have the moon waxing forward, coming off of the first quarter moon with the sun. That was exact yesterday. It's still in play today, and that's the crisis in action phase. A bit of a challenge on how to move things forward. The moon in Capricorn has a lot to say about the world, the government, things happening in a more serious way with work, business, and that challenge of the first quarter. The moon will be waxing all through the rest of Capricorn, all through Aquarius, all through Pisces, and becoming full in Aries by next Monday on October 6th. We also have a lot of mercurial aspects this week, and they're all difficult. Mercury is building a square with Jupiter. That's going to be exact by tomorrow on October 1. Mercury will then make an opposition to Chiron. That's coming up in a few days, at the end of the week, October 3. Mercury will then make an inconjunction, also known as the quincunx, to Saturn in Pisces from behind the scenes there. That's on October 4. And then by next Monday, Mercury will change signs and ingress Scorpio. So that's going to be a significant change for everything about Mercury. People's communication, the mind, everything about transportation, traveling, communications, information. This is going to start to really change perceptions in the way people are thinking and communicating overall. But in the meantime, until we get there next week, with all these mercurial aspects in difficult ways, it's going to be a lot of adjustment, a lot of irritation on the mind, a lot of mental stimulation, probably a lot of busyness for this week, with things kind of scattered in different ways. Also, we have Venus making a conjunction to the South Node in Virgo. So Venus is going through the eclipse territory. That'll be significant for markets, money, resources, relationship dynamics. I'll talk more about that as I go through the charts. But this Virgo, where Venus and the South Node are, that's being ruled by Mercury, going through all of these difficult aspects this week. So those two are still linked. There's still a mutual reception between Mercury and Venus until next week when Mercury changes signs. So those are going to be the main aspects, Venus and then Mercury, until we get to the full moon next Monday. But we also, we've had this Mars going on. I talked about it last week, Mars square Pluto, very intense and significant aspect. It did show a lot of violence all through last week, and that's because Mars moves so slow. It's kind of been within 3 degrees of a square to Pluto the entire week. Technically, we could even look at square aspects going all the way to 10 degrees. I mostly use, 3 degrees as a pretty tight orb. But, technically Mars is still in orb of this square with Pluto this week as well. I think we've already seen the most of the intensity from that square, that played out, but it's still possible. There's still this background intensity going on here. Now, Mars is in a very powerful position in its own sign, so that shows that overall there's a lot of power available. There's a lot of determination and resourcefulness available for people to get things done and to have that extra boost, so it can be used for good or bad. And when it's in that square to Pluto, it showed a lot of negative determination for people. But it's still there and available that we can use to our advantage. That's here in the background. We still have to be careful of our power level and the gear that we're in, so to speak, and how we're using our power this week. So I would say that overall, there's just still a lot of background intensity going on here. Keep in mind, we are still within this eclipse cycle, this solar eclipse cycle. And that's a big part of what's coming to a head with the full moon by next week. Okay, so this week, as the moon is waxing through the rest of Capricorn and Aquarius for the next few days, circumstances and the mood, it's being ruled by Saturn from behind the scenes. So it's a little more serious, a little more challenging, generally speaking. Then when the moon is in Pisces, it'll be ruled by Jupiter. And then the full moon will be ruled by this Mars in its, in its own sign and its power here. So it does look like, this week should be kind of intense as well. Plus Mars is in charge of Chiron, where there's wounds and sensitivities for people. And Mars is also in charge of Neptune on the world point. And even though Neptune was technically at its brightest point last week with the sun opposition, it's still there. This whole time period is Neptune's brightest, most powerful point of the year. So it's more significant. It's more relevant. And Neptune rules storms and water events. Even here in Arizona, we had a pretty big flooding event. It rained really hard for a couple days. And I'm sure there's other places around the world that are still going to be dealing with storm and weather events that are much more extreme during this time period. And that's not going to end, because, Neptune's at its brightest point, but it's also backing up into Pisces with Saturn. So this whole section of the zodiac right here deals with intense weather and kind of extreme weather, water events. So that'll probably be, for the next month at the very least, I would think that will continue. Maybe even for the next 6 months, because they're kind of setting right here at the end of Pisces, and then they're going to go direct, move across this again by late winter into next spring of 2026. So it could last for several months, a lot of extreme weather events. So that's looking like what we have for this week. I'm going to be going through the charts, talk about it all. Check out the description where I have all these written out for you, all the aspects for the week with timestamps. Okay, so let's get started here for Tuesday, September 30. This is the current chart as I'm making this report. The first few aspects is this moon in Capricorn. So again, the moon is in this first quarter square with the sun, and this is talking about Capricorn. It's about more of a serious mood and feelings and circumstances out in the world. The moon is considered debilitated here, so it's a little more challenging generally, and it has a lot to say about work and business and government. So with this square to Libra, Libra is all about relationships and compromise and one-on-one connections with people. So on the mundane level, it's definitely talking about government issues, including the government shutdown, that they're trying to come up with deals. So the first quarter moon, the crisis and action point, how to move things forward. It's a challenge on figuring that out. This is the phase where we're not supposed to back down if we do find a challenge. We're supposed to find solutions, try to overcome the issue, and move forward. Now, that doesn't mean every single person will be able to. There still could be challenges and obstacles that people are facing, but the goal is to try to find those solutions. And it's just more about, on a personal level, it's also about work and business and your future goals and ambitions. And, this could show some challenges within the work environment. I'm dealing with that today. I'm in a busy area right now. There's a lot of distractions, a lot of noise all around me. It's difficult to make this video today, but that can play out in different ways for different people depending on the situation. And then wherever you have Capricorn in your birth chart and wherever you have Libra, those two areas are, a little bit in this challenge moment for the last couple days. It won't last. It'll be moving on pretty quickly after today. But the moon is also waxing towards Pluto. That's going to be one of the main conjunctions this week. And when the moon does reach Pluto, it will then have to square Mars. So it'll kind of reactivate a little bit of that intensity with Mars-Pluto as well. But in the meantime, it's just about getting the job done, taking care of business, being more mature, responsible, punctual, in this more mature kind of vibe in the air right now. Versus Libra, trying to be more graceful, diplomatic, compromising with other people. This overall is the season of relationship and trying to find a better balance in life between things, trying to weigh things out, be more objective, more communicative. But again, because of this Mercury building up a square with Jupiter, it's already in play. It's already within orb pretty tightly. So again, there's going to be a lot of mental stimulation, a lot of news and information, and a lot of variety of different things happening that could be distracting. It's a little bit tense because it's a square. It's a little bit out of balance with how people are thinking and communicating and what's going on in the media, I'm sure. I haven't seen anything yet because I'm busy with my work, but I'm sure the media is going to be pretty amplified this week, as it usually is during this time period. Okay, so now the moon was trine Venus early in the morning. So that aspect has already passed. And then the moon is also building up a trine with the south node and a sextile with the north node. So as the day goes on, this will come in later on. Let me move it forward. There it is. So this will be this afternoon, this evening for some people, and this is where circumstances are now in alignment with fate and destiny for the future. So this is where we can maybe start moving past any type of obstacle or challenge, and whatever happens this evening or later this afternoon, this evening, we're in alignment with the future. Things can be like pushing us forward on the path that we're meant to be. And whatever is taking place can have long-term consequences in a bigger way than normal. So, I always look at it as a day of fate and destiny is in play when that happens. And then we see that the moon will make a square to Mercury later on tonight. And that's where the moon, the circumstances, the mood, the feelings, they're at odds with this Mercury. So it kind of reactivates that first quarter tension between Capricorn and Libra, the compromising, the more balanced side versus work and business and government things that are trying to move past a challenge here. So the heart and the mind are on two different pages. The way people are feeling versus thinking are at odds with each other, but it can also stimulate a lot of communication and pretty much really activate that Mercury square Jupiter from this point forward, because the moon will also be building the opposition with Jupiter for the last aspect of the night. So there's a T-square in play between these three planets for the rest of Tuesday night. So moon opposite Jupiter is also showing that circumstances are big and overinflated, and both the moon and Jupiter are at odds with Mercury, the mind and communications. So really a cardinal T-square is about initiating, taking action, but it's all kind of coming back to the apex of Mercury, the mind. So again, there can be a lot on the mind today building up into tonight where things are a bit out of balance. So just be careful of how you're thinking, how you're communicating, any type of plans you're trying to make for the future tonight. Weigh it out, kind of give it some time for this aspect to play out a little longer before making some major decision by tonight, because there is a lot of tension here. I think this is also a lot of tension this week with traveling, generally speaking, and transportation events, with Mercury here at this apex. So with Jupiter, it can go, this Jupiter is being ruled by the moon is being ruled by Saturn being ruled by Jupiter, so it still has a lot to say about Saturn, these more serious matters that are taking place from behind the scenes. Again, I think this is going to say a lot about government things that are happening today and tomorrow on the mundane level, but even on a personal level, it comes back to work, your work environment, your goals, your business type of stuff versus home and family stuff versus your relationships and partnerships, and maybe important decisions that have to be made, or situations that are quite significant happening from behind the scenes. It won't affect every single person. I think that the people most affected by this will have planets in their birth chart around 21 to 23 degrees roughly of the cardinal signs, especially Capricorn, Libra, and Cancer. If you do have those, or even more, if you have a personal square or an opposition from planets in your own chart in this same spot, then you're probably most likely definitely wrapped up into this dynamic. But this will be the background tonight. Things are out of balance. Just realize that, and try to be mindful of how this is playing out in your environment, and try not to contribute to things being out of balance. So that's the main aspect, a T-square for Tuesday night. Moving this forward, we get to the following day on Wednesday, October 1st, and the moon is at the last degrees of Capricorn for the first part of the day. And the first aspect is the moon squaring Chiron, as Mercury and Jupiter are going to be making their exact square for Wednesday. So there's a combination of different aspects, but I think the Mercury-Jupiter square will be the most significant. And there's going to be a change of mood, and things are looking pretty intense for Wednesday because, again, it starts off with this sensitivity, moon squaring Chiron. That can, again, deal with sensitivities, vulnerabilities, confidence issues, literal accidents or injuries, wounds for people. And then the moon is sextile Saturn right before it changes signs and then makes that conjunction with Pluto. So there's one helpful aspect in between all this at first, and that's, again, moon sextile Saturn can help with some maturity, some emotional stability. This is still kind of more serious because of Capricorn moon and connecting to Saturn from behind the scenes. So it's definitely, again, talking about what's happening in the government. It's going to be big news for tomorrow on Wednesday, October 1st, especially in the United States, but this can be around the world in different places, around government or even your own work environment, bosses, significant news about work changes, structure changes, roles are changing in some cases within a work environment and then government environment. And then, we have a mood change and a circumstance change for the next 2.5 days as the moon will then ingress Aquarius. Now, this is going to be the second half of the day, so the moon will be in Capricorn for the first half. And then the afternoon, evening, depending on where you live, will be this mood change for moon in Aquarius. The moon in Aquarius is still being ruled by Saturn, so it still comes back to serious things behind the scenes, but this puts more emphasis on groups and friends and community. It kind of changes the mood to be a little more detached. Now the moon, with all that, that's happening, the moon is still connecting to this minor grand trine that's been in place for the last several months about the world changing with all these outer planets that have changed signs, and they're all connecting in this way. That's very rare. So the circumstances kind of come into that as well in the afternoon, evening of Wednesday. So moon conjunct Pluto. Well, first it's sextile Neptune, trine Uranus, and then conjunct Pluto. So there's a lot of different influences happening on Wednesday evening. Circumstances are likely changing. Just be aware of that. And it's more of a connection to something about politics that's really coming out. Again, maybe there's a change about the government situation that's taking place the next couple of days. Maybe there's some sort of a turning point with that by Wednesday night. But it can also just put more energy within your own community, your own friendships, online networking, and things like that become more amplified. But things are pretty intense with the moon right next to Pluto. So it still talks about power and control issues and community intensity and this revolutionary vibe that's in place for the world with community in the streets where Uranus is. So in certain locations, this is amplified people, protests, things like that are ongoing, that are getting more energy for Wednesday evening, Wednesday night. And transformation is in the air from this point forward as the moon begins to conjunct Pluto. But, in other ways, this is also showing us the future and giving us outlets to think differently with new possibilities. So it can be good in some situations. Not everything is negative. Not everything is positive. There's always a combination of both happening. And it all depends on each individual and how these transits are playing out for you in your own birth chart. But it also, there's other charts that can show that too, like your secondary progress chart, the bigger picture of your life. If you're in a tough phase in that, then these transits can be more difficult. If you're in an easy phase, then even some difficult transits can have positive results. So astrology is complicated. It's multidimensional, and it's very hard to pinpoint, for every single person around the world just by looking at this chart. This is just the background for the world. So always keep that in mind. So if you have personal planets in your birth chart in the first few degrees of signs, then this is more connected to you and what's going on. But it can highlight the future and new developments or new feelings, and a mood change is coming in. But be aware of the undercurrents, because this is deep still. Plus the moon is kind of activating and kind of like turning the corner for this Mars-Pluto square as well. But the moon is still building a square with Mars. So it also comes back to this dynamic between Aquarius and Scorpio, which is a lot to say about attachments versus detachments. The moon here says people want to be more intellectual, more detached, more free, and people's emotional reactions aren't just normal, or, people could just react in their own ways where you're not really expecting it. And you just never know with each individual with this type of a placement. Okay, so, and then again, the main aspect is playing out with this Mercury square Jupiter. So I wouldn't look at this as overly positive. I mean, Jupiter's Jupiter. It's not a bad energy, but when it's in a square, Jupiter tends to over-amplify everything. And it's over-amplifying Mercury, the mind, communications, the media, issues about transportation and traveling. Things are, again, out of balance and kind of overstimulated here in a lot of ways. So this square is taking place between Libra, which is, again, about relationships. Mercury here wants to be more diplomatic, more graceful, weigh things out, see both sides of a situation, try to find that compromise and that harmony. But then it's running into this big energy in Cancer, the home, the family area, or people's emotional needs, which again, because the moon, or rather because Jupiter is in Cancer being ruled by the moon, and the moon is conjunct Pluto, that's an amplified intensity about this Jupiter. Safety, security, comfort, what people really need is kind of at odds with the balance, with being more compromising with other people, because people's own emotional tension is kind of overpowering the mind in this situation. So it's a lot more challenging to find that balance, to be compromising, to think about others and not just what people need for themselves in this way. But this is also talking about something on the world level, the mundane level. It's also big things that are happening in the world here with politics, government, with social activity. Again, that's over amplified, and something most likely is happening in kind of this bigger way than normal. Now, Mercury is in that reception with Venus, and Venus is approaching the South Node. So this is also going to show people, as the week goes on, what needs to continue to be released, purged, purified. What do you still need to let go and restructure around work, around health, because this could be showing you. So pay close attention to how you're feeling, how you're thinking, any kind of communications that come in for you this week, especially Wednesday here or the days around Wednesday, because it could show you what needs to change on some level. And it can also show you where there's excess, where, there's overindulgence, where there's too much that's causing harm in your life in some way, either with relationships or with your everyday life, how you live your everyday life around pleasures, food, Venus things. Now, we're not quite there to that Venus exactly on the South Node yet. That'll be a couple more days from this, but I think it's still connected because Venus is ruling Mercury in that mutual reception. So I think being aware of this goes a long way. You're conscious of this and not everybody else is. Again, this is playing out in the world, the background energy, and people can really get caught up in these vibes without really knowing it. So just knowing this can go so far in helping you be more grounded, be more balanced, and not get caught up into this big energetic that's playing out. But of course, there's always going to be some things that are outside of our control. But how we react, our emotional responses, that's up to us. And we can take charge no matter what's happening. Okay, so I do think that you should be extra careful with traveling and transportation. I notice some people getting fearful. When I talk about some aspects, they get really fearful, and you got to keep that in check. That's not the best use of astrology. If it causes you more stress or anxiety, then maybe you're not supposed to be listening to this type of stuff. So just because there's an aspect in the world, it doesn't mean every single person is going to go through some crisis event when there's a hard aspect, in the background for everybody. Most of the cases, most people are fine. We see like isolated events that get the headlines and get the news when there's major astrology going on, but most people are fine. So always keep that in mind. Like if you're going to bet on it, if you look at the odds are that you're completely fine in one of this more generalized aspects in the sky. So try not to fear things. That's not the best way to use astrology. I know it's not always easy, especially if you have a personal aspect going on in your own chart, then it's a lot easier to fear and worry about that. But I have a lot of experience with astrology day to day, and I've been through almost every major aspect there is, including almost every Pluto aspect to my own personal planets. And I'm still alive, so life is life. Anyway, let me move on here. The next aspect is the moon trine Uranus. So again, it's giving outlets to the emotional intensity. It's not just stuck here. These circumstances show that there's openings. So the moon sextile Neptune, there could be an opening to escape, avoid, procrastinate, kind of go into your own world in some way, or amplify dreams and things that are inspiring you, that are also very intense for some people. And then the trine to Uranus shows an outlet to be thinking differently. Well, if something's coming up, there's an outlet to kind of channel that energy into something else, or short trips, or communications with people, or, learning different things, or doing a variety of different things to take off the edge here if something is coming up intense on Wednesday night for you. But it's more of an open-minded, little bit more of a rebellious vibe in the air for Wednesday. And then the last aspect is that conjunction with Pluto. So transformation is happening, social intensity, power, control, the undercurrents are really powerful. And that's Wednesday night. And then we get to Thursday on October 2nd. We just have a few aspects here. The first aspect is that square to Mars. Now this is taking place early morning hours. It could still set the tone for the rest of the day. So it could play out, this kind of vibe of moon square Mars could play out any time through Thursday, but technically it is really early in the morning. So that's a lot of emotional intensity for people. People are more impulsive. They're more edgy. Now, a lot of this could also be under the surface. It's kind of stealthy, covertly being played out, undercurrents of manipulation, but it can also be issues again. It could be some social violence again. It doesn't mean that it has to be as intense as last week, but there's still that potential there because this is Aquarius that deals with the social area, and then Mars in this very powerful position that gives people more power, more determination. But it's edgy, and a square can again kind of show people are feeling this intensity or this pressure or some kind of a drive to do something. And it also, like I was saying before, it comes back to this dynamic between Aquarius and Scorpio, which is attachment versus detachment. One thing about Mars and Scorpio, it's a little bit revengeful. It holds on tight to things of the past. It doesn't forget things. And Aquarius doesn't like that. Aquarius wants to be more objective, up in the head about things, and, kind of pour out that water. Symbolically, water is the feelings, the emotions, the attachments. So it's a challenge in this moment for some people to let go, to surrender, to release certain anger issues or things that are below the surface that they are holding on tight to. I think it'll be most relevant for people that have roughly 6 to 7 degrees of fixed signs in their birth chart, planets in fixed signs. So, especially if you have your own square. I mean, if you have 2 planets in this square in your birth chart around 6 to 7 degrees of Aquarius and Scorpio, then you're really wrapped up in this dynamic. In other cases, this can show, if you do have these squares in your own chart, it can show health issues. Circumstances can be kind of forcing you to take care of or deal with something that you'd rather not. Just more activity that's kind of being forced upon you in some way. But on the mundane level, again, it's probably some overnight issues to Wednesday night into Thursday morning with protests. I'm sure Portland has always been intense with community. It's kind of a commie stronghold, and it's really amplified because I did another little video I showed you on my shorts. If you go to my shorts on my YouTube channel, I talked about the geodetic lines, and Pluto is going right through the northwest of the United States, affecting Portland in more of an intense way than normal. And that will continue into next year. So, I'm assuming that could be one place this is really activated, but it could be different places around the world socially that are over amplified and intense. Okay, so again, that's one of the hard aspects of the day. And then the moon does make a trine to the sun, which kind of shows a flow that opens up for a few hours. First thing here on Thursday morning, that background intensity is still there, but this helps people to try to be more compromising, try to be more balanced, try to be more in alignment with other people and the group and the friends and this social vibe that's connecting in a better way. But then the moon is in conjunct to Venus and the South Node as the day goes on. So there's a lot of hours in between those two aspects because this aspect won't come in until Thursday night. So maybe most of the day can be decent. I still think there's a lot of background intensity, but the fact that the moon was trine the sun, that's a better part of this lunar cycle. When the inner and the outer are more in harmony, more flowing, how people feel, what they're focused on is more flowing. It's more intellectual and objective and communicative, but Mercury is also building that opposition with Chiron, so there's still a lot happening here this week that I think is difficult for the most part. And then when that moon reaches that in conjunction to Venus, the relationships are it's not the best for relationships in this moment on Thursday night. Now that's just generally speaking. It doesn't mean you have to have a terrible experience, if you're having a connection with somebody one-on-one, but this is more in the context of groups and friends and community kind of at odds with where the preferences and the pleasure is with Venus. Plus with Venus reaching the South Node here within a couple degrees already, it's starting to be an issue about Venus things. It's not always a placement that fulfills us. In fact, things could show us where we're not fulfilled or why we're not fulfilled with certain dynamics in our life. And this can be on a personal level too, like I was saying, how we live our everyday life, habits and patterns and pleasures and indulgences that we engage in that could have a negative effect on life. Maybe we need to let go of something, purge something. So it's kind of like it just doesn't look like people are overly fulfilled, generally speaking, about pleasure, love, relationship, money dynamics. and it's kind of at odds with the circumstances and the mood within the group and the community on Thursday night. It's only for a few hours, that one dynamic, so it doesn't last very long. There's kind of this detachment vibe in the air with both this Venus next to the South Node and with the Moon here. So that's where they're similar. And that's the last aspect for Thursday, October 2nd. We get to the following day, on Friday, October 3. The Moon is at the last degrees of Aquarius, and the first aspect is the in conjunction to Jupiter in Cancer, just for the first few hours, early morning. So circumstances, the mood, it's still connecting to the group, the community, detachment, being more intellectual. People's emotions and feelings are different than just, what you would expect. That continues, and having to make this adjustment to this big emotional energy in the home, the family, the more sensitive side, the protective side. And then this is where Mercury is exactly opposite Chiron. So, this could cause some insecurities in the air for people. And the mood will change as the day goes on to be much more sensitive. So a lot of sensitivity, be careful of words. Words can either be healing or wounding for people. If you're, with talking with people, engaged in relationship activity, just be very mindful of what you say to other people, because you may not even realize you could say something that triggers or hurts somebody, and maybe you didn't mean to. I think with Mercury in Libra, it's helpful to try to be more graceful and diplomatic, but it's also connecting to difficult things, which takes a little bit of that away. Plus the fact that Mercury is being ruled by Venus next to the South Node, it could still show some words are wounding, but also healing. So you can also say things that are helpful for people as well. It's kind of a culmination point around some wounds and sensitivities. It can play out on a mundane level too in some cases, either negative or positive. I think the negative could be still, traveling injuries or accidents. In some cases, maybe there's a turning point around some sort of information that could want to help wounded people or people in need of something. Some sort of information or media could be talking about something important on Friday that's happening. But just be extra careful of words and even how you talk to yourself, your own mind, thoughts, communications. Information can have a little bit of a sensitivity to it, anything that comes in on that day. Not everybody, so it might be most relevant for people that have around 25 to 26 degrees, roughly, give or take, of the cardinal signs: Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. And then the moon is trine that, sextile Chiron and trine Mercury before it does change signs. So as the day goes on Friday, it looks like by afternoon, circumstances and the feelings and the mood is in better alignment with this opposition. So it's some sort of a turning point, important communication or information that has an effect on people in a significant way. And this is where the heart and the mind are in better alignment, because it's more objective. It's more trying to see both sides of a situation now. But there's still this base, with this moon here, it's still being ruled by Jupiter in this Cancerian area, feelings and sensitivity, the home, the family, the homeland, and what people need, what people need are really amplified this whole week. But that's an opening to help things out, for things to be a little better perhaps. And then then the moon will change signs, Ingress Pisces. That's going to be on Friday evening, Friday night. Yeah, Friday night. So there's going to be a mood change on Friday night. and things get much more sensitive now that the moon is in Pisces for the next 2.5 days. Dynamics begin to change here. Finally, the moon isn't being ruled by Saturn anymore, although it's in the same sign as Saturn and will eventually make a conjunction to Saturn. But now, technically, the moon is being ruled by Jupiter in the home. So now with moon in Pisces, talks about more of an energetic sensitivity from behind the scenes, more of an emotional need to be in a more private, safe, secure environment. It's more emotional. It's also this moon phase that picks up on other people's emotional energy very strongly. So you have to guard yourself. This is a part of the Saturn transit in Pisces to lay down new boundaries for Pisces that have been weak for many years because of Neptune through Pisces. Now, generally speaking, it doesn't mean every single person. Keep that in mind. But generally speaking, this is about guarding yourself in a way where you don't allow certain things come into your life that can have a negative effect on you. Because the moon in Pisces is like a sponge. It absorbs energy very easily. It absorbs its surroundings, other people's feelings and energetics. So it's like, for the moon in Pisces, it's very difficult to know if what somebody is feeling is theirs or someone else's, and it can feel like theirs. But it also creates this emotional sensitivity to other dimensions, other realities, this psychic energy, that's a part of it. And so sometimes, that's why Pisces has this cliche of drinking, because Pisces is a psychic sign and it can be overwhelming. And sometimes those people don't want to deal with that connection and they want to block it. They want something to take off the edge and escape from those feelings that they pick up on very strongly. But on the other hand, you have to be careful of picking up and using your imagination in ways that are negative and creating issues that aren't even there. So that's the challenge of Pisces, is knowing what is real and what is not real. And on the mundane level, again, this is talking about a lot of worldly conspiracy and scandalous activity, but it's also a lot of BS. There's a lot of imagination that's just not true of, what people are thinking is real and not real. It's just a lot of BS going on. But there's also a lot of behind the scenes things here now for the next 2.5 days, things that are under the surface that aren't just easily seen and visible of what people are starting to pick up on. But generally this is a phase where people do want to be more kind of in their own world or behind the scenes or escape certain things. And again, it's being ruled by Jupiter in the home life, so the home and your inner world will generally become more important for people on Friday, late Friday night. So if you're out on Friday night, for some people, like on the East Coast, this is like super late, the overnight hours of Friday into Saturday morning. And then in Europe, it's super early on Saturday morning. So people on the West Coast, it's, the 8 o'clock hour, but it's still pretty late. So if you're out on Friday, just know that there could be a mood change that starts to change people's needs, and, the circumstances and the vibes could start to change on Friday night. And there could be some disruptions on Friday night because the moon will also square Uranus. And that's going to be the last aspect on Friday night. Moon square Uranus could show some disruptions are possible, especially out on the streets where this Uranus is in Gemini, the local environment, streets, neighbors, connected to things that are more private from behind the scenes in this square. So disruptions or a mood change that's a little bit edgy or rebellious or wild or something unexpected, surprising could happen for some people. And then we get to the weekend, Saturday, October 4, and we have this new phase of the moon in Pisces, of everything behind the scenes that's building up. Still being ruled by Jupiter in the home life, so a lot more emotional sensitivity is in the air now. And this is where Venus is perfectly conjunct the South Node by Saturday. So again, this is about kind of, the South Node is a point of it can be a draining energy. It can be draining some of this Venus stuff. Now, luckily it's Saturday, so the markets aren't going to be open, but we could see maybe getting close on Friday. Again, I would think that this isn't the best for everything Venus. Venus is debilitated, but it still has that help from Mercury because they're in that mutual reception. So I think it does cancel out a little bit of the debilitation, but the fact that it's on the south node, that's not as helpful. Because again, it can be a draining, it can be a releasing, it can feel like we're not getting everything we want or not completely satisfied with some desires, pleasures, relationship activity, money, things like that. But it can also be in a way where we can use it in a positive way. We can look at, again, what needs to be purged and release and let go of in bad ways, bad habits, bad patterns, overindulgences, letting go of things that have an effect on your health and your everyday life. Have you been getting carried away in any type of bad habits or patterns or pleasures of life that are a little bit out of balance? Maybe with this mutual reception to Mercury in Libra, it's helping people see a better balance and what needs to change in that regard. It can, in some cases, the South Node can be like Neptune as well. That adds more sensitivity, has a spiritual connection sometimes as well. I think Virgo, it's not as that way, but it could still have a little bit of that. Because Virgo's more practical, more about work, service, health, life, being analytical and logical. But it could also bring up things of the past. Past relationships could be, highlighted here in some way. Things that are unresolved, even like karmically, things of the past. But this is also eclipse territory, so things can be eclipsed out. Things can be leaving and ending. Certain people in your life could fall away in some cases. That can be friends. That could be just different types of people, depending. I don't think everybody, don't get me wrong. It's different for everybody how this will play out. So check your chart. Do you have 18 degrees of Virgo? I think that's the strongest dynamic, 18 degrees of Virgo in your birth chart. If you have a personal planet there, one of the inner planets is personal. Well, then if you do, you're already aligned with the nodes of fate in this part of your life, which only happens in this exact way every 18 and a half to 19 years. And now Venus crossing over there, it might result in some sort of significant dynamic, in your life with money or something. And it doesn't have to be literally. It could just be, again, your own desires, your own feelings for things could be changing, or you could get the insight that helps you change for the future. But if you also have any 18 degrees of the mutable Sagittarius, Pisces, Gemini, or Virgo, then you're really wrapped up in the nodes of fate with this dynamic. And it may not just be on this exact day because the nodes of fate are here for a longer period of time than just Venus crossing over this. So just maybe ask yourself, what do you need to let go of for better health or better work life or better everyday routine life? What needs to be let go of? It's kind of like this final stage of what we've already been working on for a while. We've had all these planets cross over this point, and one by one, it's been asking us, what needs to be restructured, rebalanced, purged, purified, reorganized, let go of. And it has a lot to say about work. There's been so many people that have been changing work and losing their jobs and getting new jobs. And it has a lot to say about everyday life work. So this could be connected to that for some sort of like final turning point for some people. But there's also going to be an eclipse here next March that will kind of be the full like turning point for eclipse things that are happening in Virgo. All right, so with that, it's kind of a karmic day there for everything Venus. And then the moon is trine Mars. One second here. So the moon is trine Mars. That gives this kind of more covert opening because Pisces and Scorpio is is under the surface, behind the scenes, so people can be a little more stealthy with activity or what their intentions are. But it does give an opening for, determination, resourcefulness, more emotional power and strength and feelings. That's a little more on the down low. And then the moon is in conjunct to the sun, and Mercury is in conjunct to Saturn. So for the rest of the day, for most of the day, it doesn't look like it's totally easy. There's just that one easy aspect from Moon Mars, first thing in the morning. So for most of the day, the moon is also at odds with the sun. So they're on two different vibes, how people are feeling the internal world, what's more private from behind the scenes and sensitive versus what's out in the open socially with relationships, one-on-one connections with people, being more communicative and objective and trying to see both sides of a situation. But feelings are, again, on two different pages, how people feel versus what they're focused on, kind of clashing there. And then Mercury being in conjunct to Saturn, picking up on this weight, this pressure, this seriousness from behind the scenes too. So you got to be careful. Don't get sucked into feeling depressed or defeated or like everything's just awful. This is just a temporary aspect. If that's the case, if you do feel some of that pressure or that stress. So it's like the way people are thinking that wants to be more objective and communicative and logical, this more intellectual side of the chart is picking up on this behind the scenes vibe of pressure and responsibility or feeling doomed. You have to be very careful with all this type of Pisces going on. You got to make sure that you're not creating things out of thin air, creating stories that are, difficult for yourself when they don't need to be. This is also, again, a lot on the world stage. It has a lot to say about conspiracies and scandals and what's real and what's not real taking place from behind the scenes. People's imaginations are just a little bit out of control in this phase. And that's going to continue as Neptune backs up into that area. We're going to be like getting sucked back into the past of what we've been dealing with. And Saturn is here saying, we got to really work on this, finalize this area, complete this, and create these better boundaries and dynamics of reality so that we shift back into this new era of the world that's coming into play, and we start to let go of a lot of the old. But we're not supposed to let go of Pisces. That's the thing. We're supposed to change how we're working with Pisces. And we still have the North Node here that's trying to add, we still need faith and belief. And in this particular phase with the North Node here, like religion isn't going away. This is only increasing people's need for a higher connection to something bigger beyond ourselves. So religion, spirituality, it's still being, there's still a lot of energy being pushed into that. It's just kind of a change of belief systems in this phase for the world, different people around the world. Some people are actually finding their faith and coming into a religion for the first time. A lot of the hippies of the 60s generation is, thinking that, religion is going away forever, but nah, it's not in this phase, that's for sure. It's just being changed. It's a different flavor of spirituality that's trying to be structured and developed. And a lot of the old negative things are trying to end. A lot of the delusions and issues that have been created from behind the scenes energetically. But as Neptune comes back with Saturn and all this, it's going to kind of be like it's going to come back. We're going to have to deal with a lot of old stuff still before we're fully done with the old era. And even when we come into the new era, every time we upgrade to the next level, we take a little bit of the last era with us. So it doesn't just completely go away, but it's going to go away a lot in the way that it's been. But not in the short term. In the short term, we're still dealing with a lot of this behind the scenes Pisces stuff that can be negative. But there's still a bigger picture that says the things that are going to happen this next 6 months or so are going to lead to more positivity in that area of the Pisces area. But we have to get through the craziness of it all this next 6 months to get to that point. And there is a question mark here, as Neptune backs up into Pisces and then comes back to Aries late January into February of 2026. We are kind of in this Civil War vibe. This is where Neptune was in the last Civil War for the United States, but this feels like it's more on a global level. Even though it's a revolutionary vibe / Civil War vibe. We're in a Cold War already between ideologies. That's just the facts. We're already in a war. It's already being battled out in different ways. It just hasn't created a full-on physical war yet. But there is a question mark of when Neptune fully comes back to Aries, will it be more physical in a literal war? 2026 is definitely going to be the more challenging year that will kind of decide the fate for the world in the future. I'll talk more about that because in the meantime, we're going to have a lot of positive aspects building up for this fall as well. A lot more support. We're just in eclipse season. Eclipse season is always wild card season and shows a lot more craziness in the world. But anyway, I just want to point that out, that we're still dealing with a lot of this restructuring for the world behind the scenes. And scandals and conspiracies are just a big part of that. And it's probably going to be really amplified, so you got to be super careful of what you believe in, especially what's all over the media and social media. I just can't even deal with social media myself. That's why I'm stepping away. That's why you don't see me much, on YouTube. I can't deal with all that craziness. It's not healthy. But that's me. So moving on here. So Saturday, October 4, Mercury in conjunct Saturn is the last aspect. So still could be adjusting to some tough communication, tough thinking, and things like that. And then we get to Sunday, October 5, and the moon is conjunct the north node of destiny from behind the scenes. So again, it's a fateful day. Whatever is happening is kind of pushing people forward on the path. Your Pisces area is really lit up and kind of lot is happening from behind the scenes that's more private. And then this is where the moon is also building opposition to Venus that's wrapped up in these nodes of fate. So it does feel like Sunday could be very fateful in some way here with relationships, money, and again, what needs to be purged and purified and released versus what you need for your future and your needs, safety, security, comfort, home, and family. The moon does trine Jupiter, so that reinforces some hope, some support, some strength early on Sunday morning. And then there's a lot of conjunctions. The moon is at odds with Mercury and in conjunction with Mercury. So the heart and the mind are on two different pages. Again, this more energetic sensitivity and intuition and feelings behind the scenes versus this mind that's trying to be more objective and intellectual and communicative and outward. So probably not the best moment here, first thing on Sunday morning, to try to communicate or try to do errands or this more like mercurial activity. Kind of give it a break if you can. And then the moon will change signs. But first, the moon will be conjunct Saturn for the first part of Sunday. So it's pretty serious, pretty heavy. Actually, this is most of all day on Sunday because this is by Sunday evening, Sunday night for some people, that this conjunction is perfect. So Sunday evening and Sunday night, it's just a heavier vibe, more energetically heavy, sensitive, pressure, weight, burden, the need for escapism, but also the need for maturity and looking at responsibilities too and feeling that vibe of pressure. But then the moon changes signs, comes out of Pisces and ingresses into Aries with Neptune on the world point by Sunday, late night Sunday into early morning on Monday. And this is the beginning of the full moon vibes because the full moon will be in Aries. So there's a lot of light on the moon. It's super intense, Now that the moon is in Aries, it's being ruled by Mars in Scorpio. And Mars is finally, it's still been connected to Pluto this entire time, but it's at the final, building up to that 10-degree aspect, and it's going to be moving away from that. But it's still ruled by Mars. This is a very powerful moon because it's almost full, and it's being ruled by a Mars in its own sign of Scorpio. So it deals with a lot of things coming to light that are deep and buried, but it also amplifies people's emotions and their feelings to be more intense, to be more direct and forward about things. That's coming out into the open now in a bigger way. So people's emotions are powerful. There's a warrior vibe in the air with this full moon building up, and it's right on the world point of Neptune here. So it amplifies people's drive and ambitions and determination in a bigger way for Monday. The moon, is also connecting to this minor grand trine late on Sunday night before we get to Monday. So it's also, again, this is the world dynamic of shaping the future. And perhaps as we come into next week, we have this connection after everything that's played out this week. We have a stronger connection to what's ahead for us, how we feel about the future. Plus a full moon is bringing consciousness expansion and more awareness out, of where we stand, about our individuality, our freedom. But this can still be a very impulsive moon. But the fact that it's being ruled by Mars in Scorpio adds a certain level of control to the issue. Mars in Scorpio can be very controlled. But with the moon in Aries, it still has a bit of an impulsiveness to it. So for some people that are more conscious, they can be more controlled. Other people that are just, wrapped up into, the winds of life that push them into things, then they're more impulsive and more inspired about something. In some cases, illusionary. In other cases, in a better way of looking at things. So it all depends on the person, but it's definitely a big change of mood in circumstances from this point forward. And then we get to Monday, the big day, October 6th, with the full moon building up. The first aspect is the moon sextile Pluto, so it's empowered, a lot more power for people, a lot more strength and determination for Monday, a lot more things that are coming out to be more visible, to be more seen, a lot more of social connections too that are visible. But the moon here still shows it's about the individual. Freedom and independence is very strong for people, their need for that. And again, this is going to be a full moon that's kind of bringing something to a head about self versus others with the Libra sun. So we also have a big change as Mercury is at this critical degree Sunday night into Monday morning before it changes signs as the day goes on. Mercury then changes signs into Scorpio. So this is a really big change on Monday. So expect next week to really be different. Things are going to start to change in a way that are less sensitive, more passionate, more determined, but the way people are going to communicate is going to start to change. And financial matters, relationships are going to start to change because now that Mercury is in Scorpio, it's being ruled by this Mars, and now there's no longer a mutual reception with Mercury and Venus. So now Venus is fully in its debilitation until it gets to Libra. It's not going to be long because it will get to Libra, and that's where it's going to be very strong. But there's going to be a time period here where now Venus has lost something, lost some help of being more diplomatic. Now, also, Venus is ruling the sun in Libra, and it doesn't have that help from the mutual reception. So even the Libra sun is still a little more, this is a new vibe that's a little more raw, a little more direct, a little more intense, and not as diplomatic, not as nice. It's more real, it's more honest, and it's about looking at things in a logical, analytical way. There's a need to kind of get down to truth now that Mercury's in Scorpio, and plus with Mars there, it really amps up people's communication to be more intense and fierce. And there can still be a lot of under the surface things going on too, but the fact that the moon is becoming full in Aries, being ruled by that Mars with Mercury there, People are more real with what they're doing, what they're saying, and everything's coming to a head. It's like the max intense moment of the month. This is a full moon that's coming off of an eclipse. So there's some sort of a major turning point for Monday next week. And the moon is in conjunct to that Mars. So having to adjust to what's visible, what's being seen in this more direct Aries way, where everything is starting to really speed up, be more impulsive and intense, versus what's below the surface and hidden, or adjusting our power level. Or again, there can be a lot of covert things happening too. Not everything is visible, but there is a lot that is visible that's coming out. So having to adjust this between this impulsiveness versus this control emotionally. And then Mercury is in conjunct to Neptune on the world point, adjusting to the world dynamic and inspirations and illusions and things that are more visible to the way people are thinking. So now with Mercury and Scorpio, again, it's more raw. It gets down to the bottom of truth. It wants to speak in a more direct way with Mars right there. It's just not as diplomatic, and it's still wrapped up in emotion. It's just Scorpio emotion is a little different. It's just more controlled typically. But you have to be careful because manipulation, and not only that, but as I get to next week's report, Mercury will be squaring Pluto. We could even say it's already squaring Pluto, even though it's not exact. So it really amplifies that tension again between Scorpio and Aquarius Pluto, on a more communicative level, a more fighting words. And also, I think this could be some issues with traveling, transportation, technology issues, things breaking. But also, I think it's some sort of a turning point around protests, the group and the community intensity. There's going to be a new dynamic by next week. Something is much more fierce. And then that's the last aspect, is the Aries full moon for this report week. And that's going to be at 14 degrees of Aries. So check your chart. First of all, check where you have Aries in your birth chart. That's where the full moon is. That's where there's a turning point. Roughly 6 months ago in the spring, well, if you're in the northern hemisphere, we had an Aries new moon. And now, everything that's been building up over the past 6 months, roughly, it's coming to a head, and we're at a turning point and a rebalancing point. So check your chart of that area where you have Aries versus Libra. That's where there's a lot of intensity. That's where there's consciousness and awareness and something trying to end or begin in your Aries area of life. And then check to see if you have any personal planets around 14 degrees, give or take, but 14 is exact. 14 degrees, I can align this perfectly if we want to get down to the exact detail here. It's going to be 14 degrees, 8 minutes. That's the exact full moon. So check your chart. You have 14 degrees of one of the cardinal planets, especially Aries. If you have 14 Aries in your chart, then you're connected to this full moon in some sort of a significant way. That's showing you something. That's a turning point. Again, starting or ending. And also, if you have 14 degrees of Capricorn, Libra, or Cancer, definitely connected to one of my personal planets perfectly. So I'm under it too. But this is an impulsive, fiery, passionate, warlike full moon. Now, on the other hand, this could talk about there is a potential of a turning point about war because it's coming to a head. And it says what needs to change in the Aries vibe to accommodate the Libra vibe of more peace, more compromise, more balance. So this will show us what needs to change in our area of Aries life about our independence, our freedom. So it can be on a war level, on a mundane. There's potentially, I can't promise you, but there's potentially a turning point for at least one war. going on in the world. Now, it can also be in the context of personal relationships. What do you need to change? What do you need to end or give up a little bit to accommodate relationship in your life? Can you give up a little bit of your freedom and your independence to have a better relationship or to have more connection with one-on-one or something like that in a personal partnership or relationship? Or does a partnership have to end? This is usually more on the side of the self has to change something to accommodate others. If this was a full moon in Libra, then it might be more about letting go of a relationship or something to accommodate more freedom and more independence. It can still be that way in some cases, but generally it's more about having to give up something about the self on some level to have more balance, more compromise with others. Or it could be on a different level. It could be, what do you need to give up on this self level to find more balance in your life in some way? Again, it can be on different levels because the sun in Libra is being ruled by Venus in Virgo, which deals with work life and health life and everyday routine life. What needs to find a better balance? What do you need to give up that's too selfish or something, on some level here? But it's still a full moon in Aries. It still has a warrior vibe about it. It has an intensity about being more direct with things versus being more compromising. So again, something's either ending or starting in this area of your life. Or it could just show a change, a change of dynamics, a change of circumstances from this point until we get to next April when there's an Aries new moon. And let me tell you, the next Aries new moon in April, mid-April, there's going to be a stellium of planets in Aries. Very rare. And it's going to be a big new initiation of moving forward in this area of life. So from now until April, there's going to be some dynamic changes in your Aries area of life that will also affect your Libra area, your Cancer area, and your Capricorn. So self, work, goals, ambitions, career, relationships, partnerships, and your home and your family life. So just pay attention to what's coming out next week with this. It's, again, peak emotional energy. And then from this point on, the moon will be waning and releasing this level of intensity. But it is ruled by Mars, so it still comes back to your Scorpio area of life as well. Scorpio deals with other people's money, other people's resources. It deals with the more intimate, deeper side of connection with people. Again, do you need to let go of something to have deeper intimacy with others in this part of your life? Or, it's all about that freedom and that independence. But Chiron is there too. So Chiron is a part of this. Now, Chiron is only going to, it's coming to its last degrees by 2026, and then it'll ingress Taurus and then come back to Aries. But it's at the final stages of this transit about the self and how the self feels wounded and what the self needs to feel okay within relationship. So this full moon could also highlight certain Chiron issues for people as well. Now, this full moon, it doesn't really have any major tight aspects. It's kind of isolated here by itself. So it's kind of just a normal, I don't want to say normal because every full moon is different, but it doesn't have a ton of major aspects. I think that as time goes on, as we get into next week, it's going to be that Chiron square, or technically Jupiter square Chiron. That's building up, and that's going to be a big part of the fall months, is that square that's coming in that this full moon will be kind of a turning point with and kind of activate. So again, it comes to like how people feel about themselves, their confidence, what they want, their freedom and their independence versus relationship. But my hope is that there could be a turning point for at least one war in the world with this. And if it's not a turning point, then it's going to be an escalation to the next level of war. But I still think that the odds are more of having to let go of the Aries vibe with the full moon here. Not totally let go, but a turning point so that there can be more of this Libra. But we'll see. We'll see how it plays out by next week. It still has this intensity though next week. There's no way around it with this Mercury square Pluto. So that's the part that feels it's, are we going to be able to have more peace, more balance, more compromise, more relationships, or is this going to be a war vibe? Because I think on the social level, I think on the political level, it's definitely more on a war level because of Aquarius, the group, the community, science, technology, but media, there could even be something like an attack on media, next week with this Mercury square Pluto, traveling, transportation. There could be a plan, like a covert secret plan that's building up in some cases that, Scorpio, everything private and deep. But that exact square will be next week's report. So it could still manifest on this full moon because it's already so close within a degree there. But I think next week is going to be pretty mentally intense with that Mercury square Pluto. And fighting words are very possible in a new way. So it's going to affect the protests for sure on some level. This is going to be all about protest to some next level stuff by next week. Community, politics, and all that. And then on the bigger world level, the war, one of the wars coming to a turning point for good or bad. And then on the personal level, like I explained. All right, so that's what I'm seeing for the week ahead. Appreciate you watching, leaving a comment, letting me know how you're doing. And I'm wishing you the very best. So take good care.